Gardening can offer stability and security in this crazy world we're living in. You might be concerned about war, disease, inflation, supply shortages. If you're at all thinking about gardening or gardening now and wondering about how to do more of it to feed your family, join me today as I talk about gardening and preparedness. Hi, I'm Gardener Scott, and let me share with you a secret about gardening and preparedness. Fear will not make your plants grow faster. Anxiety will not lead to a bigger harvest, and worry will not feed your family. But gardening, learning how to grow the food that you want to eat, actually can reduce anxiety, reduce worry, and should eliminate fear. Those of you who are already practicing preparedness or just now getting into that concept of being prepared for the future, understand that it's not an overnight event. I've heard it described by those who are practicing preparedness that it's a marathon, not a sprint, that you're looking years ahead as you're learning how to be self-reliant and self-sufficient. Well, I think that is a good comparison. I think gardening is much more than that. A marathon has an ending. You know where the finish line is. With gardening, I look at it more as a journey. It doesn't have an end. There's always more to do. There's always more to learn. There's always more experience to gain. And that's the critical component about gardening. You will be a better gardener. You will be more successful. You'll be able to feed your family with experience and knowledge. There's an old Chinese proverb that says the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. The second best time is today. And that's a great way to look at gardening from a couple different perspectives. First off, many of the plants we're growing, particularly trees, need to be in the ground for years before they'll give you that harvest. But I think more importantly, it takes years of gardening for us to figure out just exactly how to do it, to figure out the things that we're doing wrong and fix them, to focus on what is working well and do more of that. The first 15 years that I had a garden at my home, I did a lot wrong. I made a lot of mistakes. I killed a lot of plants, but I was learning during that entire time period. And in the last 20 years, when I began taking Master Gardener classes and became a certified Master Gardener, I've killed even more plants after knowing what I'm doing, because I began to push the limits. I began to experiment. I began to do things that would work in my garden. And a lot of the advice, a lot of the information you get on YouTube and in other sources may not be best for your garden. A lot of these authors and a lot of these video creators live in regions where gardening is very easy. And if you're lucky to live in one of those regions, well, my hat's off to you, because it is an easier journey. But for some of us, it's much more challenging. We have to learn, we have to try, we have to do that experimentation and figure out what doesn't work so that we can have success in our garden. In my Colorado Zone 5B garden, it's always a challenge. It's April, it's springtime. Many of you, many gardeners around the world have gardens actively growing. For me, right now, it's 24 degrees Fahrenheit outside. That's why I'm sitting in my greenhouse. It's too cold to be actively growing plants. So I have to figure out, for me and my garden, what's going to work best. And that's what you need to do. You need to figure out what's going to do best for you in your garden. what plants you should choose, how to grow those plants, and then do it and figure out if those choices you made were appropriate or if there's something else you need to try. That's why gardening is a journey, because every year we're doing something different. Every year we're trying those new things. And especially now, as more people are getting into gardening, recognizing the magic of growing your own food, but thinking that it's something that they can just dig a hole, put a seed in, and come back a few months later to get their food, well, they're sorely mistaken when they realize it's not that simple. There are so many things to think about. At the top of my list is soil. Soil is key to gardening success. Well, you need to figure out what kind of soil you have. You should do a soil test now. You should analyze that test and figure out what you need to do to make your soil better. And in many cases, it's going to take at least a year, maybe multiple years to reach that point where your soil is good enough to support the number of plants you need to grow. That's why it's not an overnight activity, because we have to give ourselves the time we need for our own knowledge, our own experience, and then for those plants to grow. While the concept of preparedness might be a new idea for many people, this really isn't new. For most of the history of humans, we've grown our own food. It used to be if you didn't grow your own food, you were going to starve and die. Well, we've gotten lazy. We've become reliant on the supermarkets, and we've lost all of that knowledge that our previous generations knew. It's not that hard to achieve that knowledge in today's world. You're watching a YouTube video. There are a ton of videos. I have hundreds of videos on the Gardener Scott channel to help you learn how to garden. You just have to be willing to take that step. And a major part of preparedness for many people is the concept of stockpiling your food. If you think SHTF is going to happen, you've probably already got that stockpile, or you're moving in that direction. But what happens when the stockpile runs out? What happens when you can no longer replenish all of those supplies? That's where gardening comes in. You can learn to grow your own food. In the meantime, while we still have access to all of the supplies in the store, we can use what we grow in our gardens to supplement our diet. As we rotate that stockpile, you're using some of that and then using what's in your garden to complete your diet. In the future, the garden may become the primary component so that the stockpile doesn't run out too soon, and maybe eventually so it can replace that. There are many aspects of gardening that you need to learn and practice to get to that point. You can go to a nursery right now and buy your plants, but what happens when the nursery doesn't have plants? Well, you have to learn how to grow from seed. And right now you can order seed online and go to a Walmart to buy your seed. But what happens if that seed isn't available? You need to know how to collect your own seed and save it for the next year and subsequent years to be able to grow the crops that you want to. These are the kind of things that take time to develop and take time to learn, because there will be many mistakes along the way. I guarantee it. But learn from those mistakes and do it better the next year, and you'll have more success. And hopefully, with each year you do more and each year that you become better, you can become the old grizzled gardener like I am, who's been doing this for over 30 years and having pretty good success in the garden. The kind of success that I know a lot of people are envious of, but I'm still making mistakes because this is a long-term journey. There's just too much for any one person to know, but there is enough that each person can know to have the success and grow the food. And as you think about the stockpile and you're growing that food, there's a whole other aspect to this that you need to think about as well. That's food preservation. The year after I became a master gardener, I became a master food preserver through the Extension Office taught by Colorado State University. I now know how to dehydrate my food, how to can my food, how to pickle and ferment my food, so that when I have the harvest that I am growing myself, it's not just what I can eat today and eat tomorrow, but what I'm going to eat next month and the month after that, until the weather can warm up to the point that I can start growing again. Your choice of plants and how you preserve your harvests become a critical component when you're thinking about gardening and the preparedness aspect of it. I really don't have any of the fear or anxiety or worry that I know many people do, because I'm a gardener. And I think that also helps give us a positive outlook on life and what we're doing outside. But if SHTF, I'm ready. I no longer have a lawn in my front yard. I'm growing a lot of ornamental grasses and perennial plants and natives because I want it to look good. But that entire space is garden space. So in a worst case scenario, I can pull out those flowers and those grasses and grow food because those beds are already prepared, all ready to go. And you may be living in a house that has some of those areas around the foundation of your house that just came with it. And you might be growing some roses or some other pretty plants. Well, part of being a gardener and part of understanding your preparation for the future is acknowledging that a plant is a plant. And if you've got the knowledge to grow a rose bush next to your plant, well, then you have the knowledge to grow sweet potatoes instead. That's kind of how I look at my garden every single year. I'm not doing this because I'm a prepper, trying to anticipate what's going to happen in the future. I don't know what's going to happen in the future, but by being a gardener and having the garden space, I'm prepared for the times when I can just get out and enjoy my time and experiment and try new things, or in a worst case scenario, be ready to feed my family and preserve it for the future and guide others. Help people like you on this journey so that you can reach the same point of comfort that I've reached. It's not what you have in your basement. It's not the stockpile that really matters. It's what you know that makes the difference. And that's what I'm encouraging you to do today, to learn more so that you know what's going to be required for you in your garden, in your own region. What do you need to know to reach that point where you can relax and enjoy all aspects of gardening? And then, of course, as far as preparedness is concerned, know that you've got what you need to be able to survive into the future. And then also share that knowledge with your family and all the generations to come. I'm Gardener Scott. Enjoy gardening.